First of all, good morning. Sorry about that. I just launched right into it, right? So welcome. But I really wanted to talk a little bit about how do we move to the how of our strategic plan. We have talked about the why quite a bit over the past couple of years as we built our shared vision and our strategic plan. And in any one of those processes, you really start with an initiation phase, which is usually a lot of excitement around initiating a strategic plan. You move into an implementation phase, which, as you know, we did a lot of work a couple of years ago, and I'll share some of that with you. But that implementation phase can be difficult, and then you move through that to a institutionalization phase. And I think we're kind of in between that implementation and institutionalization phases of our strategic plan, and those are tough times. Those are when people and organizations usually stop because the work does get difficult. And so what I wanted to take a few minutes this morning to talk with you about is how do we move through those phases and how do we do that together so that it does happen for all of our students. I mentioned we talked about the why, and that's really important. But we do know that our why is really about kids, and that all kids deserve a rigorous education, all the opportunities they have to be able to reach their fullest potential. And I think the work that we do is really, I think it's the toughest in society. Being a teacher today is really very difficult work. We are facing many complex issues around achievement gaps, funding, and I could go on and on about that. But that why always comes back to our students and what we're doing. And so our work is very rewarding when we come together and we're able to do things that really help all of our kids achieve. And I mean really all of our kids. And so when we think about Carolyn White's work out at Stanford on mindset, really we have to have that mindset of growth and that we can do the things that we want to do and accomplish for all of our students. We have come a long way and our results show it. You can't read this, but this is really a timeline of the work that we've done. And in 14-15, we did a lot of implementation. We did shore up many of our systems. And we're going to move through this and continue on our journey with our strategic plan, moving through those phases that I mentioned to you, and then ultimately in 2018, 2019, begin to think of how do we renew our strategic plan? How do we begin to move forward with new ideas, with the work that we've been doing with our students? It's hard to believe, but 5 years ago, for those of you that were in the room 5 years ago, in the fall of 2012, I shared with you the systems wheel that I have used over a past number of years. Really focusing our work on student achievement and student engagement. To me, those are the two leverage points that we need to really attack so that we can really make sure that all kids can learn. And the other aspect of what I'm going to concentrate on this morning is really shared governance and shared leadership through the design process that we're beginning to implement. You have begun to work with your principals with that work. And also this concept of shared autonomy. The fact that we are a system. We are a school system, not just a system of schools, right? So the work that we do, while we want you to be autonomous and be able to make those decisions close to the classroom, you do need to share that throughout the system. What we do does impact one another, both positively and negatively. So we need to always keep that in mind when we use systems thinking as a part of what we're going to do as we design our future work. And the other thing that I think is really important and to note at this point, what we're trying to do, the work that we're doing is really bigger than ourselves in many ways. We're trying to, with our strategic plan, make sure that all kids can read and know their math facts by the end of third grade, personalized learning for every student that walks into our classroom, integrate those kids with technology and help them be able to use that as they go out into the world. And you don't see entire school districts trying to do that. You see pockets of that in places. A lot of times you see it with charter in front of their name or academy in front of their name. But what we're trying to do, and for me, it's so important that we do it for every child that walks into our classrooms. Because all of them deserve your best teaching and they deserve a great education that we are able to provide here at Westside. When you go back to the building today, you are going to receive a handout that's going to kind of lay out this process a little bit. You might have, if you've had a chance to see the news and notes from last week, I tried to write a little bit about this to give you a little bit more of a background with what I'm going to be talking about this morning as well. After I share with you the the systems wheel, I began working on how do we really make shared leadership come alive in a school district. And so consequently, I began and had done a lot of reading over the years. It's something that's been very much a passion of mine, of how do you share leadership in a school organization. And so I came up with this design team process, more theory than action at the time, really understanding our current reality, that commitment to the truth, understanding our context and really becoming data informed, using that data to challenge our thinking, to help us see the issues that are out there, where are the leverage points in our system, seeing the possibilities, that ability to reflect, that the idea that we talk about with nexting, right? What's next for our district? How do I begin to really see what's possible in my classroom or in my school district or in my school? And then co-creating a future that we want for all of our students as we move up the ribbon into that designing the future, and then ultimately telling our story and sharing our results with the community. Next, I began to say, okay, how does that really happen at the school site? And I came up with this process. I won't go in depth with it, but the idea of the unity of purpose, that shared values and belief system that we all have. We don't always see each other every day. Today's sort of atypical, but we all are working toward the same goals with the same beliefs that all of our kids can learn and deserve a quality education. The shared autonomy, but with responsibility. I think that's probably key of what we're going to talk about today, because we are going to ask you to begin designing learning opportunities for your kids that you think are best. But there is a shared autonomy there, but with responsibility. As we've always talked about, not everything we do will work perfectly. And that's okay, but we need to take responsibility for that and move on. And I think the one thing that really helps with that is the third principle, and that's a commitment to the truth. Really begin to look at our data and really be honest with ourselves, what is working and what is not working, so that we can move forward and really help all of our kids. And maintain that creative tension that we want between our current reality and what we want for every student that comes into our schools. So when we look at this, as we try to connect this really from the boardroom right down into the classroom, we begin to say, okay, what does this look like at the school site? And now this may resemble a school improvement process, but you might recall that I have talked about changing that language from school improvement, the idea that we're doing something wrong, to school design, and really thinking about how do we migrate the great things that we're doing and then have that permission to redesign things that would be best for our students. And so this idea of building capacity, building leadership capacity throughout our organization. Anyone can be a leader. And I think those are always things that we need to remember. Part of being a systems leader is listening to that feedback that goes out and then comes back through the system. So you can see with our design team collaborative, which you'll be working on and have been working on already with your principals, is that the school as a whole has decided maybe what those goals are going to be. I know that I've met with each principal, and everybody has, I'd say, 3 to 5 goals that they're going to be working on this year. And that's been decided by looking at your data, the information that we are trying to provide to you from the ABC to be able to make those kind of decisions. So I hear things like, we're going to be working on PBIS, so we're going to be continue to work on reading or writing skills or math skills, or there's a variety of goals that are out there throughout each of the buildings. They all don't look alike. There are some similarities with some buildings, but not entirely throughout the district. And that design team that's highlighted there is really about the group that kind of pulls everything together. They're the clearinghouse of information. They're making sure that the working groups are doing what, working through and trying to help solve the issues that they've identified, or the data point that they want to correct. And again, trying to look at those leverage points. Those things are going to make the biggest difference in your building. And then the self-study cycle, really begin to look at how do I identify priorities by looking at the data, how do I create possible and generate solutions, prototype possible solutions, and ultimately selecting one and then implementing that as a school as a whole. And that's kind of how the process will flow. We've been working with your principals on that, but it's my desire to really see you guys begin to see the possibilities and design the future that you want for your students in your building. I think it's really, who else should be making those kind of decisions but the people closest to the work, and that's our teachers. Again, I can help create the structures for that, but really you need to be the people that are closest to the work, helping us to make those decisions. That doesn't always mean you get everything that you want. It does mean that our voices are being heard, throughout the system. And so we want to be able, we talk a lot about Brene Brown and being vulnerable, but that's part of that is being able to find your voice. Find your voice with your colleagues, find your voice with the leadership in the building, be able to design those things that are most important. Again, as I said, doesn't mean you get everything you want. Does mean that we have rich discussions around that. I'll touch upon how we try to embed that opportunity in our process so that you can have those kind of conversations and that voice can be seen and heard, I guess I should say. Voice seen? No, voices are heard. Heard. So we really want to move from this idea of isolation, right? That we all went to our respective classrooms. When I began teaching in 1980, we really did go to our classroom and shut the door. We didn't really talk to one another. We didn't have planning time and team time and collaborative time. And as a young teacher, I was so fortunate to be assigned a room next to the Florida State Teacher of the Year, Kathy Sanders, who probably doesn't know it, but probably kept me in the profession because of her mentoring and the work that she did with me as a young teacher. To help me see what was right and good about what we do as teachers. So we want to move from that isolated, I'm going to shut my door, to this, where we do open the door, where we do collaborate, where we do interact with the system across, where we do learn from each other, where we become a learning organization. You know, you can walk in, there's not a time I don't walk into Carla's classroom and I don't leave having learned something from Carla about what we're trying to accomplish with our kids. Or what could maybe be done slightly better, or what we could tweak to do this. So that idea of opening our doors and really beginning to work with our colleagues is really important. That helps with that reflection. Whenever I have my own idea, I have to bounce it off about 4 other people for me to make sense of my own thinking, right? So we have to constantly have those conversations. And as humans, we want to be a part of those conversations. We want to be in those conversations because it helps us make sense of our thinking. I call them reality checks, and some of you in the room, sometimes I will stop by to get a reality check on occasion. And so when I think about why am I pushing this, why am I so passionate about shared leadership, it's because my personal mission has always been to help people find meaning in their work. I can't make you happy. That's something that's really kind of up to you. Happiness is not my area. But I certainly can help people find meaning in their work by creating structures that allow you to do your best work on a daily basis. And that's why this is so important to me, that we begin to have a process that we can share across our district so that we can actually collaborate, dialogue, and really learn from one another to do what's best for our kids. And again, I did try to touch on that in the news and notes. And you can see things that are happening across our district. Just 2 examples from people redesigning what's going on. And this is at Paddock Road with their Tinker Lab in the library, where we bring together philosophies of library science, gifted education, and regular education all into one right there in the Paddock Library, where kids are able to come in and really think critically and do things under Kelly's direction. Our Westside CAPS program, which is really beginning to take off this year, as we're really getting more and more students involved in that program. In fact, we had a young woman write us the other day with an email saying that the CAPS program has changed her life. Changed her trajectory. She didn't want to come to school. And suddenly she sees a relevance. It's not an intelligence thing, it's a relevance thing. She sees relevance in the work that she's doing, and so that makes her want to be there every day, right? Another goal of mine is to have an organization where people want to come and learn every day. Teachers want to come and teach and learn, and learners want to come and be in your classrooms and really be engaged in the activities there. But it's my firm belief you can't get there without a process. You've got to have something when things get tough that you have to be able to rely back on, be able to go back and say, okay, wait a minute. You know, because a lot of times we chase our tail chasing symptoms instead of the root cause of things that are happening in our organizations. And every organization has them, things that they can work on, things that they can improve. And these processes sometimes get messy. And again, that's why you need to have something that's consistent, something that we use. We're not always going to agree as a team on what's the best avenue to take with some of our goals and things that we're trying to do. So it will get messy. There's a couple things that I tried to do and tried to integrate, and we're going to let you experience some of this later today. I've tried to take some of the best points around design thinking out of the Stanford School on design, and later today you'll get an opportunity to work through some of those design principles that Stanford pushes to get you to begin thinking like a designer, but also systems thinking. Very important that we that we become a learning organization, that we do listen to the feedback in our system, that we don't ignore that information coming back, forward, out, all over the system, that we open our thought horizons, that we challenge our mental models about what's best for our kids. It's okay to challenge that, suspend our assumptions about what we think is best. I've been doing it for 37 years. I've built up some assumptions. But you guys always challenge my thinking in some way when I come out and visit your classroom. And that is so good for me in my position as superintendent. Extending our time horizons. I think we need to understand that the work we do might not be completed in a year. That's okay. We're going to keep at it. I always say that our design team process, we take the last month of school and the first month of school. We don't do any of that because ending the school year and starting the school year is such hard work. But in between that, we begin to continue to work on our school design, the ways that we want to improve what we offer to our students. And so consequently, we need to work on that, but extend that time horizon just a little bit. I think the other thing is to always look at it from the user's perspective. That's what you'll learn today in the design team thinking. The one thing they talk about is empathy. And that empathy really is about what does our user need. And I have to always remind that about you when we design professional development. It's not about what I think we need, it's about what you're telling us that you do need. And so consequently, always taking a look at that user's perspective when we design things for our learners. And then I think finally, the adaptive schools has taught us that we always want to presume good intentions. The process is messy, and we will not always agree, but I know when I have that discussion with folks in the room that I presume good intentions about everybody. We all want what's best for our kids. We may not always agree on the right path to get there, and that's why these processes are important to us, to come together. Adaptive schools teaches us how to dialogue, how to have a conversation, even though we may not always agree on it. That's important, and it was important enough for us to take a step back last year to try to get as many people in the room with some of that training so that we could learn how to come together and truly collaborate with one another and being able to share those ideas, to be able to do inquiry and advocate, inquiry into others' ideas, advocate for our own ideas. And so I've tried to mesh these four sort of change processes together. And I think collective impact is another one that is really important. An example for that is PBIS. That's a system-wide approach. We're going pre-K through grade 12 with PBIS. So when you look at a collective impact, they try to usually take an issue and they will look at it through mutually reinforcing activities, data informed, being data informed, shared measurements, a common agenda. But again, that idea that we're going to mutually reinforce one another throughout that pre-K through 12 PBIS approach is really important because that will be reinforcing all the work that we're doing throughout the system. So as we push this together, this idea that we are going to be focused on learning, that it's interdependent, and the fact is one person cannot do this alone. It's never been my objective. This is something that we have to embark upon together. I often said as a principal, if you think one person's going to do it, it's just not possible. And that's that's ultimately very true as a superintendent. We have to make sure that we bring everybody along on this journey to really change the things that we want to do for our students. So really it's about time that we all begin to shift this work out of me kind of designing the structures to you actually doing the work and designing things that are going to happen in your classroom. It wouldn't be a presentation if we didn't have the house document, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I just wanted to put it in there just in case you had forgotten. But I did want to focus on the 3 empty boxes at the top. A colleague of yours mentioned to me probably over 12 months ago that maybe we ought to leave these and move these to the top to allow you to do that design work. And that really made an impression on me because that's exactly right. It's your turn to do that kind of work. It's our turn to support that work. So my work begins to shift out of less of directing and more of supporting the work that's going to happen across our district in the confines, in the guardrails of our strategic plan and our shared vision for all students. So we're going to be shifting that. Again, this design team collaborative. Why do I want to do it? I want to engage staff. I want to bring their voice to the forefront about what's best for our students. I want you to be able to reflect on mental models and really have deep conversations with your colleagues, whether it's in a PLC or a working group on the design team or just around the lunch table during a day of school. getting all those voices to the table. And the last piece here is about trust. From my experience, trust is always very difficult to build and very easy to destroy. And so we have to always presume those good intentions about one another and use those processes and go back to them when things get tough. Because we don't want to hurt any trust that we build. Over time, through these working groups and the decisions that are made, my experience has taught me that trust just constantly evolves because we learn to trust one another in the decisions that you're making for me. So what we wanted to do later today would be to go through some of the design principles through an activity that we've done. We did this with the principals the other day. It was called a gift-giving experience. That was a little low-key one, but it was a way to design how someone might want to receive gifts or how they might want to give gifts and how they really, from the user's perspective, dealt with being given gifts. We're going to ask you to go a little bit deeper with your principals and really take a look at the goals that you've set. You may work at a design team activity that as a whole staff, depending on what the principal has decided, or it could be each of your working groups is going to work through this, depending on how you've decided to do that at the building. But it is an opportunity to use some of these things, to use empathy, to test your hypothesis, to prototype different models, and actually, at the end, build a model that might solve the issue that you're talking about. But really the idea here is to begin to get you to think like a designer and to think with using design thinking principles. So again, I think it's going to be a fun activity. We had fun with it the other day. It always stretches a little longer than you might think sometimes, but it is an opportunity for you to really come together and use some of the things that we've talked about with adaptive schools and other things to really communicate with one another and build a model based on what might be your goal in your building. So again, it's your time to design a future worthy of your past. We've talked about that since probably for the last 4 or 5 years. Of how do we continue the legacy here at Westside Community Schools? It's a strong legacy. We stand on the shoulders of some great people that really built an outstanding district. My sense would be that they built it because they listened well to their teachers and what was best for their students. And I want to make sure that we do that going forward. So I appreciate all the time you put into that, into the designing of the activities at your schools. I think it's really important to get your voice out and to listen to that. And I think you're going to do great things. I don't walk into a building here in a classroom that I'm not amazed at the work that goes on. So we need to be able to share that and learn from one another. So again, I know you're going to have lots of different activities today. It's a great opportunity for learning to take place, and we certainly appreciate everything you're doing for our students. So have a great day.